Hello, everyone, and good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight on Thanksgiving evening. Tonight we have Ayyā Somā, who will be talking about finding contentment in our jobs in the workplace. Um, as usual, Ayyā Somā will start off with a guided meditation, then a Dhamma talk. And if you have questions at any time, feel free to type them in, and Ayya will address them at the end of the talk. At this time, I'll pass things over to Ayyā Somā to guide us in meditation.
Thank you, Bhakti-Sumana, and thank you all for joining us this evening or this morning, most likely, because I doubt that anyone in the United States is watching right now. But most likely it's people around the world or people perhaps who are not really American like myself. All right, so we can get in a comfortable seated position. And gently closing our eyes. And since there's a pandemic going on, and most likely we're alone in the room, we can take advantage of this privacy by taking some deep, loud breath that will not disturb the other people in meditation with us. So filling up our lungs entirely. And breathing out all the air out of our lungs. And we can take a second deep breath. And second deep out breath. And we'll notice that the mind is a little bit settled, more settled if it was restless at the very beginning. And we can just spend a few moments enjoying the state of being. Just being present without taking any particular object as a point of awareness. But just being all right. Okay. Happy with just being. Happy with just breathing. Happy with nothing to do. Happy with nothing to think about. Nowhere to go. No one to talk to. Nothing to see. not doing anything, but allowing ourselves just to be here, present, experiencing the breath, experiencing the body. Dwelling in the present moment. Not taking interest in any of the contents of the thoughts that may appear in the mind, but letting them just arise and cease on their own, allowing us to take a break from thinking, from getting involved. If we feel that the mind is too scattered and we would wish to anchor it a little bit, we can narrow our focus of attention to the breath, perhaps narrowing it even further to the tip of the nose. Watching every in breath and out breath. What does it feel like? come out from meditation and relax or stretch your body if you need to.
And thank you, Ayyā Somā, for the meditation. And good evening to some friends joining in. Denise, who's in New York. Denise Guzman.
Oh, hello, Denise.
And Gita Ratnayake from New Zealand. Putrika, I forget where Putrika is from. Sri Lanka? Well, our international audience. And Denise. And all our friends watching but not commenting. So at this time, I'll pass things over to Ayyā Somā for Dhamma Talk. And as usual, if you have questions, feel free to type them in and we'll address them at the end of the talk.
Thank you, Bhante Sumano. And we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namissami. So the subject tonight is finding contentment in our job. Is that correct? Someone had suggested this topic. It wasn't my ideation, but I decided to take it on because it was basically pretty much the sort of mission of my lay life before I found the Dharma. I had decided that since we spend so much time, most of our time actually goes in what we pick for a livelihood, then it was very important that I really got that right. Perhaps the rest I would allow some leeway, but when it came to the job, the work that needed to be done, I was very adamant not to settle, but rather really finding something that I really loved. So I brought my computer tonight because actually I wanted to share two things with you, and I didn't have the opportunity to print it. But one is this amusing, actually, picture that was shared with me that is basically a graffiti where it says the sort of usual standard stock phrase, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, except that the never work a day in your life is crossed out and it's replaced with, and you'll work super hard all the time with no separation or any boundaries, and also take everything extremely personally. And I saw that the other day, and I was talking to a friend from my previous life in this life, as I like to say. So someone who was from my life pre-Buddhism, who is in a creative field, and we've spent many years through the sort of trials and tribulations of really doing what we loved, and we managed to accomplish that. And we also managed to work super hard all the time with no separation or any boundaries, and also take everything extremely personally. So it was like, that's about right. That is pretty much sums up the experience of many people who take this pursuit of finding joy in or what they think is joy, or being accomplished in their job, or having a career rather than a job, or however you want to phrase it. And there's so many inputs that society gives us, that the culture where we grow up actually tells us this is the right path to pursue, this is the right career, these sort of circumstances, these conditions will generate happiness. And depending on our level of ambitions, we will pursue them in one shape or form. If we're looking perhaps for safety, we'll veer towards a more stable job. If we are veering towards love, I guess, then we will really investigate what are our aspirations and pursue this. And it's kind of interesting because when one reflects on sort of parameters that the Buddha instead offers us, he hardly ever talks about, he ever, not hardly, he does not actually talk in those terms. He does not say, well, people should just do what they love, or people should, make a lot of money, find a job that really it's highly respected or at the top, like they should have this sort of career rather than this other career. Doesn't really talk about it in those terms, but he has a different framework. He uses a different framework entirely. He talks about right livelihood, which is a factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. So the path to accomplish the cessation of suffering. And so he doesn't frame it as like be a successful editor in Milan, or he doesn't frame it as being like the CEO in Manhattan, or like a great lawyer who is, I don't know, doing X, Y, and Z things in whatever part of the world. But rather, pretty much he's inviting us to investigate if what we picked, if our choice, regardless of the sort of shape and form of the job that we are entertaining, is it beneficial for ourselves? Is it beneficial for others? And is it beneficial for ourselves and others? And most importantly, is it not harming ourselves? Is it not harming others? And is it not harming ourselves and others? So the Buddha focuses more on what we should not do, what we should refrain from doing, rather than, what. It's more the framework of society, that it's like a sort of ambition to get to a certain point, to a certain stage. But rather it's instead of the route of greed, of craving, of accumulating, it's instead the route of compassion. And I've been reflecting actually a bit about this, this sort of meme or whatever, the image, the graffiti that I was sharing with you at the beginning of this talk, actually made me reflect quite a bit, interestingly enough. And I was, sort of remembering my mind when I was talking to my friend. Remembering my mind back in the day, doing really everything that I wanted. I actually managed to really do things that I loved. I was so quote unquote happy about producing, like dealing with the people that I picked that had my same interests, and dealing with all these like beautiful things, or things that made me what I thought happy, that I wanted to be surrounded with. Yet I was so unhappy. My mind was so depressed. And then I was thinking about these days where my mind is actually quite happy. And for the past 5 years is when this sort of happiness has taken place in my life. And it's not that I spend all my time here at the monastery in blissful meditation. I would love if that were the case. There's lots of responsibilities, lots of things that need to get done. So, in one shape or form. Perhaps I'm not as busy as I used to be back in the day as a lay person, but I definitely have lots of things that I need to take care of. So I was reflecting, how is the mind so happy and peaceful now, comparatively speaking, anyway? And why was it such a mess when the mind was doing what it wanted to do, but now the mind actually has so many restrictions and limitations? And interestingly enough, the answer was, instead of doing what I want, right now I do what is needed. So hardly anything that I do on a daily basis is something that I would wake up in the morning and go like, now I'm going to do this. I'm really looking forward to even washing the dishes, or I'm really looking forward to figuring out certain administrative tasks here at Buddhist Insights, or figuring out the schedule or the sleeping arrangement of the monastery, whatever it is, or the new upcoming policies due to the coronavirus. None of that is anything that really is what my mind naturally gravitates towards, but it's something that is needed. And that is for my benefit, for the benefit of others, and for the benefit of myself and others. And it's not harming anyone. And magically, these conditions bring joy to the mind, bring peace to the mind, bring relaxation to the mind. And so once again, that this sort of reflection, consideration made me think about how, getting back to the topic, what is really contentment in our work. And lots of times we focus on the wrong part of the sort of equation, the wrong part of we think that the subject matter is something else. We think that the subject is work, that the work is what needs to be shifted. And in fact, sometimes it does need to be shifted if it is bringing harm to sentient beings, whether they are humans or non-humans. So sometimes, yes, absolutely, that needs to be shifted. But some other times, what needs to be shifted is, once again, our approach. Are we pursuing craving, or are we pursuing letting go? Are we pursuing dedicating our time for others, building something that is that brings nourishment to other people, whether physically or mentally, or whether it's something that instead fuels our ego? That strengthens our sense of me. And as someone who used to work in that field of creative field of art, and I was very much surrounded by artists or creative people of all different sorts who are actually all looking. They also have noble pursuits aside from doing certain jobs that pay the bills, so to speak, and just create conditions for just getting by. There's also a lot of times the vocation to understand our experience, understand our existence as humans. And we want to produce something perhaps beautiful, or something personal, our contribution, make our lives meaningful. That was a big thing for myself, the struggle of how do I make my life meaningful. But lots of times, in this pursuit of making our life meaningful, or right, actually looking for meaning, we think that the meaning is outside, that there has to be something external that will bring us, give us some meaning. And the Buddha offers us a different perspective. I very much appreciated Venerable Thich Pai, senior monk in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, who was asked once, what is the meaning of life? And he was like, well, that's a great question, but I have a better question for you. It's, how do I make every moment meaningful? That's a better question. In the perspective of the Buddha, what the Buddha tells us is, when it comes to the livelihood, once again, is to really, really purifying our conduct, really purifying our virtue, really cultivating the wholesome and eradicating the unwholesome. That's pretty much the work that needs to be done in all 360 degrees. And that's making the moment meaningful, and getting to what actually Venerable Santi last night was defining as the art of arts, so spiritual practice. So I had another thing that I wanted to share today, and it's a sutta this time. So the Buddha is going around. So it's from Samyutta Nikaya 7.17, the Builder, not Boulder. And so the Buddha encounters the Brahmin Bharadvaja, the builder, and the Brahmin was doing some building work in the jungle. So he asks, he sees the Buddha in meditation, and he goes up to him and he asks, I enjoy doing this building work here in the jungle. I wonder what the ascetic Gautama enjoys doing. And the Buddha replies, sorry, actually, the builder Bharadvaja continues, what kind of work do you do as a monk in the jungle? How do you find enjoyment alone in the wilderness, Gautama? And the Buddha replies, there's nothing I need to do in the jungle. My jungle's cut down at the root. It's withered away. With jungle cleared and free of thorns, I enjoy being alone in the jungle, having given up discontent. And it's interesting because Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, so this was Venerable Sujato's translation, but Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi has a slight different translation where it's all about work. So where the Buddha uses the words like I don't, and fundamentally the meaning that I took from it is I don't need to find any enjoyment in work. I don't need to find fundamentally distractions in order to give meaning to my life. The actual work of works, the art of arts, is not creating something, but the art of arts is actually the work that needs to be done. The most supreme work is the eradication of suffering. And so actually I finished the work altogether. I don't even have to do what needed to be done has been done. And I found it so inspiring, so much Dhammasukha when I read that sutta a few days ago, and it was somewhat around the time where I was talking to my friend, and it made so much sense to connect it back. Of what is it that really brings contentment, and how do we find contentment? And sometimes we'll see that actually the most simple the job is, the better it is actually to support our spiritual practice. I remember once there was a friend who came to a retreat, and he was archivist, I think it's called in English, someone who does archives, filing,
Archivist.
archivist. Got the accent wrong. And when we were talking about his livelihood, he was a little bit ashamed because he was in New York City, and he was saying, "Yeah, I just have this like humble job. I'm an
Archivist.
archivist." Um, and I was like, "Oh, that's great. That sounds incredible." And he's like, "Does?" Like, yeah. Oh, what a wonderful job to do. That you can, that is not harmful. It's actually helpful. Helps so many people. I was thinking, oh, it's so great. Actually, when we had volunteer archivist, I was very grateful. What a beautiful gift that they brought to the monastery, putting all things in order where I could finally find them. It's a joy. It's a joy. I remember clearly all the volunteer archivists, and we've had tons of volunteers. Our organization runs entirely on volunteers, but like, yeah, I remember the archivists. They did something really, really beautiful. But at the same time, it didn't muddle up the mind. It didn't create mess. It's like the perfect retreat job, which is the perfect also layperson's job. It's like, are you attached to your job as an archivist? And he's like, not really. Great. That's wonderful. Are you obsessing about it day and night? No? Wonderful. That's perfect. That's awesome. If something happens at your job, do you take it personally? If they tell you, like, oh, you are archived this poorly? No? Yeah, because it's just, oh, sorry. Okay, I'll try better next time. Great. Wonderful. It's like all the conditions are in place. Like, that's perfect for very much in accordance to the Buddhist teachings. And his perspective shifted all of a sudden. He found contentment because he saw actually the wholesomeness of his livelihood, and how what he was surrounded with, perhaps outside of Buddhist circles, was telling him to pursue craving, to pursue unhappiness, to pursue sensual pleasure, which of course there is a bit of gratification there. Of course, it's quite nice to do a job that people are obsessed with and has a certain status, and you're invited in exclusive parties perhaps, so that other people cannot go, and then there's a sense of specialty, and perhaps you're offered refined food, and you're offered refined dwellings. There's of course all of that gratification that the Buddha encourages to reflect upon. If there weren't a gratification in all of this, we wouldn't be obsessed with it, right? We wouldn't be looking for it. But then what happens? What happens when we are pursuing all of this sensual pleasure? There's lots of drawbacks. The more we pursue acquisitions, the more suffering appears in the mind. For example, if we are not praised for our jobs, for our work, or if we don't get paid for our work, perhaps our work can be fantastic. I remember my friend, her work was great, but there was a certain time in her career where no matter how beautiful her photographs were, no matter how many places she was published, there was very little, if any, retribution at all. And so that created the conditions for sorrow, lamentation, despair. And as well as myself, actually, I've experienced exactly the same thing. Or being criticized for my writing. Right to the heart. Or sending ideas and being told that they weren't okay. Right through the heart, because a acquisition wasn't present. And then when we acquire any type of possession, whether it's physical or mental, status, or a paycheck, or a house, or building, whatever type of acquisition, then we need to maintain it, keep it, conserve. fearing that others are going to steal it, fearing that others are going to take our job, our commission, our client, our house, our bag, our money. And inevitably, that is bound to happen, which creates, of course, another train of sorrow, despair, lamentation, and whatnot. And then perhaps we'll become jealous and envious of the other people who have the belongings. And that creates the conditions to break the precepts in order to get all these acquisitions. So, boom, getting back into, we think we are veering towards happiness, but in reality, we're veering towards more suffering, piling it up for this life and the next life. Buy one micro happiness, get million sufferings free. And that's the sort of work, introspective work that we should start doing and reflecting. Where are our motivations and where are our intentions? And what needs to be cultivated and what doesn't need to be cultivated. Yesterday during Pali class, we were studying this sutta that really made a mark on my mind. Once again, also because I was having these conversations, well, mostly with my mind, but a little bit with my friend, and I was remembering the really depressed mind that I had several years ago. And I was surrounded by so many beautiful things, so many beautiful experiences. And it was such a bizarre kind of dissonance, right? Like you're surrounded by so much great things. You should be happy. It's also what people tell you when you're in those situations. They're like, why are you unhappy? There's everything that you should want. That's exactly it. What you should want, but not what you need. And anyway, the sutta, I don't remember the name, but anyway, the parallel was that actually paying more and more attention to the qualities of the beautiful create the conditions for us not to get rid of greed, hatred, and delusion, and for sorrow, lamentation, and depression, grief, despair, and all of these unwholesome states of being to arise. And yeah, I have to say that is that rang very true to my experience, and so much building so much faith for the Dhamma and so much gratitude. Today it's Thanksgiving Day, which is a very controversial day where there's both actually a lot of suffering to be remembered from the history of this country, and also the flip side, the gratitude also to be shared. In theory, the name of Thanksgiving, giving thanks, evokes. So I'll focus on the latter. And I have to say, I just want to be very grateful to the Buddha for having made the decision to share the Dhamma with all sentient beings, and for us to have this path where we can practice it and see it for ourselves in every single step. And then it's not a matter of like finding contentment in our job, finding contentment in our family, finding contentment anywhere. We're just like finding contentment. We are in a state of contentment. We learn how to be content, whether we have a job or we don't have a job, whether we have a family or we don't have a family. Despite of all conditions. So I'm still learning, but I have hope that um, actually I have a complete faith that this is possible. It's already like shifted my life in 5 years. Anyway, so these are the thoughts that come to mind tonight. Hope it was useful in any way.
Thank you for sharing, Ayyā Somā. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And welcome to some more friends joining in, including Victor. Good to see you online. And Canute as well from Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, sadhu.
And Poonam is also saying good evening. So at this time, if anyone has questions, feel free to type them in, or we'll have an early night. And if there's any questions from the live audience or Facebook as well.
Early night is good too. We've done a lot of talking today at the monastery.
We do have a question from Facebook.
Oh.
So Fauji Nagalok says, someday we have to dwell in what peace of mind consists of, and then asks, peace of mind equals hard work, question mark?
Can you repeat it? I don't think I quite grasped it.
So first they said, someday we have to dwell in what peace of mind consists of. I think they just mean someday we have to dwell in peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ask, peace of mind equals hard work?
Ironically, yes, I would say. We do have to put right effort. That is definitely one of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. We have developed a lot of quote unquote bad habits in this life and past lives. So there is definitely the component of hard work in the way that we need to be really committed to purify all of this. But at the same time, it's also quite easy, quite straightforward. When one understands, when one encounters the Buddhist teachings, they're actually like somewhat off-putting for how simple and straightforward they are. When one thinks, for example, about contemplating the breath, how simple is that? When I first shared it with my dad, for example, he was like, "That is like elementary." And then he was like, "I'm not even gonna like bother to do that." So there is definitely the quality of simplicity of it being quite elementary, right? The idea that we're breathing in every moment. But the profundity of these sort of simple truths, also the law of gravity is pretty simple, but it's also very profound in the way that it shifts our experience on a day-to-day basis, on every moment, actually. So there has to be the commitment, which can be either, hard work or very simple work, very easy, work. That depends really on our past karmic conditions and our tendencies of mind too. The Buddha says that, our paths will be slightly different as practitioners based on literally what we've cultivated in the past. So for some, it will be very smooth and fast. For some, it will be very difficult and like long and, tormented in a way. For some, it will be short, but I guess difficult. And for some, it will be long and they will have a great time while at it. Very smooth and easy. So it's really a combination that we can't really control. What he does also say, though, is that even, a day invested in really purifying the mind, no matter if we are on the floor weeping and wailing and, being in distress, if we're really committed in purifying the mind and committing wholesome deeds and building up our virtue, then there is nothing reprehensible about our conduct. So, yes, we might be experiencing the distress of past karma, but we are creating incredibly powerful new karma. And to quote one of my favorite quotes, actually, from Venerable Drime, a Tibetan monastic, Tibetan monk, she said, you can't control the consequences, but you can control the causes. So when we are talking about hard work, it's hard just simply because we haven't put effort, the right effort in the past. So we can't really control that because it's hard because, it's just the consequences. But we can definitely control the causes in the way that right now we are committed to it, no matter whether it's easy, hard, difficult, neither. Like, we just do the work. We need to do what needs to be done. And eventually we'll get the results that the Buddha tells us we will get. And we don't have to wait, till Nibbana. Like, it's immediately, there's an immediate release from suffering.
Okay. And Denise has a question. So Denise asks, it's difficult to find contentment when the culture of the office revolves around negativity. Any ideas how to counteract the tendency to go along with these negative points of view?
Yeah, absolutely. The mind is like a mirror, so it reflects pretty much anything that it's surrounded with. So in order to be somewhat impermeable, I guess, to what is around us, we need to train it. It won't happen just because we want it. An untrained mind, if surrounded by other irritated minds, will become irritated. An untrained mind surrounded by peaceful minds will become peaceful. It's only when one has a really strong practice, from my experience observing different practitioners at different levels of training, what I noticed is that the mind is impermeable when it's strong, when it has really cultivated certain tendencies, that it's very difficult to backslide from there. But for most of us, we're always tending towards backsliding. So very permeable. So that's why the Buddha said, in my opinion, that's my interpretation of Kalyanamitta is the entire path. So spiritual friends, having people who are, aiming towards the right, sort of the same goal, which is liberation, towards practicing the teachings. And that's because we will help each other out. I see it here at the monastery. All my spiritual friends, we might be very different. We might have, different interests, different backgrounds, different stories. But we're all committed to the path. So we help each other in being content, really, and aiming towards awakening. So when it comes to, of course, being a layperson, having a different sort of environment when it's not 24/7, it still comes from cultivating spiritual friends, cultivating the practice outside. That's also why we meditate, why we meditate. We start familiarizing ourselves with the tendencies of mind. We train ourselves to be non-reactive in a sort of safe space. So when we have unpleasant sensations happening in the body, like right now I have unpleasant feelings in my leg, for whatever reason, has decided that it's experiencing some sort of bodily pain. So there is an unpleasant feeling that is received in the mind. And instead of shifting the posture, I am practicing equanimity towards it. So instead of veering towards what I want, I do what is needed. Right now, I am in front of the camera. I need to stay still. That is what is appropriate. And this is a safe space where to do this. But if I were in another place where there's lots of different things going on, I would probably move a million times without even being aware of it. So once again, training outside of the office, making a commitment to really understand, becoming familiar with how your mind works, practicing, and no excellence can be acquired without constant practice. So you constantly practice, and then there will come a point where your attitude will shift at work as well, where the negativity of people will stop affecting you, or at least it will affect you less and less and less. And that's because your mind is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. But you can't do it the other way around. You can't expect that just by being in that environment, that will make you a great practitioner. Usually it's the other way around, right? There's the negativity that you absorb at work, and then you get into meditation, you're like, oh God, my coworker is horrible. I can't stand that person. Oh, why did they say that? So we start actually, instead of practicing peace, liberation, contentment, or understanding our state of being, we're actually practicing aversion. We're practicing resentment. We're fueling irritation. And we have to just, there's no shame in all of this. It's just really causality in essence. When you put these things together, this comes to be. When you eliminate these things, this doesn't come to be. So we need to understand what are the right ingredients to put into the mix, and how to train ourselves. I hope that answers your question.
And hello, Miguel, watching from Chile. And Gita Ratnayake says, most animal farmers treat their animals with great care, but they are killed for food. In New Zealand, farming is considered valuable for economics in the country. The karma they create must be very mixed. That's a question.
The majority of us create mixed karma, but the Buddha never said to pick something because it creates some economic benefits in the country, or he never talks about I don't know how you say it in English, Prodotto Interno Lordo, PIL, like
GDP.
GDP. Thank you very much. I knew it in Italian, but not in English. So he didn't talk about those terms. Those are not our concerns as practitioners. So it's not our concern to think about other people's karma. We have enough karma of our own to worry about ourselves, to be concerned about ourselves, than to be concerned about other people. So unless people, are actually asking us what is the appropriate, course of action, then I would say, think about creating the good conditions for yourself. And yeah, the Buddha was pretty clear. Dealing with animals, even without killing them, just dealing with other sentient beings, it's wrong livelihood. There is infinite bad karma to be made there. So yeah, perhaps you are feeding people, so there is something wholesome to that, but there is at the expense of a lot of unwholesome things. So yeah, sometimes we need to be a little bit black and white and not find excuses. The mind tends to always look for the bright side sometimes of unwholesome things. But it is unwholesome to kill sentient beings. It's very, I would be lying if I said otherwise. There is nothing. You can also feed other sentient beings by killing humans. Our flesh is just as edible. Perhaps it's not as tasty. I seem to understand that in the animal world, we're on the least of the appetizing menu, but we're still I'm pretty sure that if the fox who lives here next door found a human corpse, she would devour it because she's hungry. So how do we feel about it if it's humans rather than non-humans? And then I think the answer is pretty clear. There's nothing that is wholesome about it.
And then Vitor says, could you share with us again the name of the sutta you read?
Yes.
The Buddha and the...
Yes, and let me find it. It's Samyutta Nikaya 7.17.
17.
7.17, yes.
Okay. And then Denise says, yes, the stories about coworkers and clients chase me around all day in her mind.
Yeah, so do it the other way around.
And then Jonathan, welcome. Jonathan says, could you please speak to balance?
Balance in what? Can you be a little bit more specific? I mean, Buddhist practice is, I can start improvising if you want, before you ask before you clarify. But it is a balancing act. It's quite interesting. We were having, together with the monastics, a bit of discussion today in terms of the monastic rules. And it's so easy to veer on one side or the other. So yeah, I feel like Buddhist practice is a balancing act. It's a practice of understanding what is the appropriate response. And there's not a kind of, since it's not a dogmatic religion, like you should do this and you should do that and you should do this, for the most part anyway. I mean, there are certain things like we covered earlier where there are things that are clearly unwholesome and there are things that are clearly wholesome. But sometimes, there are precepts that it's not about it being wholesome or unwholesome or morally reprehensible, like the practice of not eating after noon. There's nothing, horrible or immoral about eating in the afternoon, but rather it's a training, and it requires, I guess, an investigation. So the Buddhist path, at least my experience of it, has been a constant investigation of really trying to understand what is the purpose of all of this, and in every moment, how do you apply the Dharma so that it is appropriate to the circumstances, to the conditions in place. And in that case, it is a balancing act of trying not to veer too much to the right, not veering too much to the left, not getting completely overcome by emotions and not becoming completely repressed emotionally. So finding an understanding, finding a balance within our sort of humanity. And it's very easy as practitioners to veer in one way, to go in one direction or the other, more often than not, pushed by our delusion, pushed by what we are not aware that is even there, which oftentimes is our cultural conditioning. So things that are accepted in one place then become kind of like a sort of norm that is the way to express the Dharma, or vice versa, that perhaps then a good practitioner is supposed to act in a particular way or not display particular characteristics due to beliefs or ideas or customs. So navigating all of this is in fact a balancing act, but it's also like a great opportunity to really understand what the Buddha is talking about and how it's relevant for us. I don't know if I really answered your question or if you have more details to share.
Jonathan just said of diet, but I think what you said applies unless you want to add more.
Balance of diet. How is that related to work? Are you in the diet business? Monk chat, yes. I think you should bring the diet question to Friday evening monk chat, and one of the venerables present will answer. I don't think, unless you are on a diet at work, trying to find contentment with your forced diet at work or something,
Or maybe they're a dietitian.
or maybe you're a dietitian. We'll see.
Well, that was the final question on YouTube of the night. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us from around the world, it seems. Just a
Right.
couple people from the US. And as usual, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., there will be another sutta study. And then in the evening at 7:30 p.m., monk chat, where you can bring all your questions left over from tonight or unrelated questions to this talk, but related somewhat to Buddhism. And we'll see you then. So we can end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And enjoy the rest of your night.